Hello, everyone. So tonight the live is in English. Tonight for me, but afternoon for Darren, I guess. Tonight the live is in English, and we have a very nice guest here, a very special guest, Darren Fung. I met him in 2004 when we participated in the ASCAP film scoring workshop. He's a Canadian composer living in LA, and he has done many soundtracks, and he's going to talk about how to record orchestra on a tight budget. And for those who don't know, I'm doing 2 lives a week to talk about music creation. It's every Monday and Thursdays, 8 p.m. Brazil time. Some of them are in English, some of them are in Portuguese, but I'm going to find a way to add subtitles to both languages, okay? So let's call Darren here to talk with him. Hey, Darren.
Hey, Douglas. How's it going?
How are you doing, man?
Good. Thanks for having me. It's fun. It's fun to reconnect after all these years. So yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long time. You talked like a couple of years ago, I think. You found me like a voiceover Canadian accent.
Yes.
A French Canadian accent, right? So
I did.
nice.
I did.
So, Darren, how would you like to start? Maybe start telling us a little bit about your story, your background.
My background, sure. So, like all good Chinese boys, I started playing piano when I was 3. And did dab a little bit in the violin. Didn't get too far with that, but played saxophone as well when I was 12. And I wrote my first piece of music for orchestra when I was 15. The orchestra back home where I grew up, the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra, they had this little project called the Young Composers Project, where I got lessons, composition lessons, and I got to write a little melody for a little 4 or 5 minute piece for the Edmonton Symphony. And at 15, that was really cool, and I really loved that sort of stuff. And so that made me go to music school. Music school, I learned about sort of all this, all the crazy avant-garde, 21st century music stuff that I actually have a lot of respect for, but just that wasn't really my sort of thing. But I'd always loved film music. I'd always loved, John Williams and Hans Zimmer scores growing up, and so I did it. I did film scoring. I wanted to go to USC, but I couldn't afford it. It was, as you know, it's stupidly expensive. But I managed to get a couple of great professional development opportunities, like the ASCAP workshop, which we did together. I went to Aspen for summer, NYU, and really just learned scoring by doing it. By getting best practices from here and there. I did orchestration for other composers. I did a little bit of assisting, but not a lot. I definitely worked for other composers, but I was never the studio guy. And I guess I started out, with the stuff that I learned from, the NYU workshop and the ASCAP workshop and from Aspen. And we learned how to score using very old-fashioned things like the stopwatch and the clickbook and all that. And I didn't really have any computers at the time. So what I would do is that I would post up these posters at the film school in Montreal saying, I'll score your film with orchestra for free, right? Not really knowing what a big thing that was. But I would basically then go, convince 20 of my friends to come into and play for pizza and beer at 2 a.m. at the concert halls in Montreal. But what that really did is that taught me how to do it, well, and that taught me how to do it quickly, not wasting time. So I'm really good with working with orchestras, making things go fast. Which is obviously important for doing things on a budget, but also knowing where to cut corners and where not to cut corners. And so that was kind of that was my version. That was a poor man's version of USC, I guess, was convincing all my friends to play on my scores for free. So yeah,
great experience, anyways, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That time, were you in LA or?
No, I was still in Montreal. I graduated from McGill University.
This university, they had film scoring program there?
No film scoring program. But what they did do, they had a great, composing program, a great performance program, for players, and a great recording program. And that recording program was key because that got me into the studio, free studio time, for the recording students to kind of take on film scoring sessions where there's all these other complications. Like, you're not only producing the music, you have to worry about picture and all that. And Pro Tools back at the time, in 2002, 2003, so that's 18 years ago. We couldn't run picture and Pro Tools at the same time, right? It would crash the system and record. It would crash the system, right? And so we had to figure out, what do we do when Pro Tools crash? It's like, okay, we'll throw out the picture. Trust your click track. You have to, and so all of those sort of things, for the recording engineers that I worked with, they learned a lot. I learned a lot, and we all had pizza and beer at the end. So, and to this day, at the end of all of my sessions, we try to have pizza and beer.
That's good.
That's just the hangover from the no money days. So
yeah, that's good, man. That's good. And so nowadays, how long have you been in LA?
So I've been in LA now for 11 years. No, 10 years. 10 years. 10 years. Sorry, 10 years.
10 years. Oh, so when you went to ASCAP Film Scoring Workshop, you were still in Canada.
Yeah, I was still in Canada. I was still in Montreal. But that was my first sort of introduction to LA, right? And recording sort of, we got to record on the Newman stage there, which is phenomenal. Just just incredible feeling, and to get those players there, and can't wait to go back. So
yeah. I remember though that Concert Masters, the older sort of. Yeah. I'm not sure. He's European, I think.
Yeah.
I remember Richard Bellis told us to write something for the violin, starting easy and getting, a little bit harder. Yeah. And then I wrote something. I thought, he's not going to play this. And then he performed it. Sight reading double time. Amazing musician.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
So Darren, you chose some subject to talk about, which is recording orchestra on a tight budget, which is very interesting subject. What would you like to tell about it?
Well, so here's the thing, and especially for all the people, I think in Canada, the U.S., anyways, I feel really fortunate for the fact that I've managed to record a lot with orchestra, right? Especially compared to a lot of my peers, and it's because that, part of it is because that's what I do best, right? That's my shtick, but it's also because I made it a priority to do that, right? So clearly, you're not going to, you can't record an orchestra for a feature film for $1,000. That's not going to work, right? But I've certainly done feature films where the orchestra recording budget was $8,000 or $9,000 US, right? And so that's not a huge amount of money, and then obviously you need to keep money for yourself. But what I do want to stress is I love going to Prague. I love doing that, but it's also important to make sure that you keep supporting the local industry too, because that at the end of the day. But how I feel it is that with a budget that these smaller indie things would have, they would have never had the orchestra to begin with. But if you're able to get these directors and producers hooked onto good quality music, they're going to budget more and more and more as it gets along, right? So, but in terms of that, I think that there's a lot of little things about recording on a budget. There's a lot of things that you can do to make it more affordable, especially when you're starting out, in your career. Like my very first feature film that I did wasn't a huge budget, but it was a decent budget. It was, I think, about 30,000 Canadian, which at the time was like 23,000 American. So not a huge budget, but we recorded with an orchestra, right? We went to Prague.
Nice.
We recorded, the second feature film I recorded with an orchestra again in Prague.
Did you fly to Prague too?
Yes.
Or
yes.
You did to conduct
and part of it, and part of that's a choice that I make because first of all, I love conducting, right? It's just I love conducting. It's fun. I don't get to do it enough, and if there's an opportunity for me to conduct, then I'm going to take it, right? And the second thing is that I feel because I'm a competent conductor, I feel like I can get results faster than a standard conductor because two things. One, I can handle the orchestra, so that's not an issue, right? My technique is not an impediment to getting the work done. But second of all, I know my music the best, right? So
Sure.
I can tell something. Hey, measure 43. Let's punch in there. But the other flip side to it, though, that you have to also make sure that you have someone in the booth who you trust, who's listening for things like intonation or ensemble or cohesiveness, to get all that stuff together. Because if you don't have someone that you trust there, you may walk away with something that you're not happy with. Right. And so I think the first rule of recording on a budget is make sure that you have a team that you trust, right? So if you're doing it for the first time, get references, talk to people, because there are a lot of people who will offer something and they may not deliver, right? But you need to make sure that you have a team that you trust. Pika, my contractor in Prague, we have a fantastic relationship. The last time I was in Prague was a couple of years ago, and we were reminiscing that it was we've known each other for over 16, 17 years, and we were kind of joking that his daughter, when I first met him, his daughter was the age that my son is right now, and now she's an adult and she's grown up, and it was just it's kind of scary, but that relationship. That relationship, make sure that you trust people, trust your engineer, trust all these people. Because if you can't trust these people, you're going to freak out and you're going to micromanage, and the show's going to go to shit, right?
Right. You always need to make sure to have some pizza with them afterwards.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
So this first feature film you did, you went to Prague. How many people went to Prague with you, and how big was the orchestra?
Yeah, so the orchestra was, I think it was about 35 or 36 people, right? So it wasn't a huge orchestra, and it was just me. I brought a friend along with me to help me produce in the booth, right? Which it was great, just to hang out and have a friend there, to be there. Yeah. But also on the other hand, I think that if I were to do it again, knowing what I know now, I'd be happy to trust the people who are there, who are competent, right? So, so the first time, I used their engineer. I conducted it. So the strings were probably, I can't remember what the strings were, but it was probably like 6/4/4/1, something like that. So it wasn't a huge string section, but it was also there were no big heavy action scenes or anything like that. It was kind of a romantic comedy. It was coming of age film. It was
Did
fun.
you have to do any overdub?
I'm trying to think, because it was a long time ago. We didn't, there were a couple of things that we should have done overdubs with, right? And so one of the first lessons that I learned was, so we did all the percussion live with the ensemble, right? And I remember there was one cue that had this triangle ostinato, and triangle bleeds through every single freaking mic that there ever is, right? And so that sort of thing you'd want to do the overdub, right? I didn't do a second pass on the strings. We didn't really have the time to do that, but one of the things that I've learned about recording sort of on a budget when you're doing those extra passes, so you have to weigh the balance between how much time is it going to take you to do it 2-3 times over again versus how much time is it going to take you to do it once, right? I remember one project I did, it wasn't in Prague, but it was back in Canada, where if I just added maybe a few more musicians, like I think the ensemble was 6/4/4/3/1 or something like that. It was smaller, and so we ended up tracking the strings over top of each other. But I think that if I just added, two more, one more to each desk, right? 2 or 1 more players to each desk, I wouldn't have had to have done the overdubs. And then I would have saved all that time, and then I wouldn't have had to go into overtime, right? So I think it's a fine balance, right? You need to see whether, part of the other issue was that the room was small. The room was smaller, and I was scared about, I'd never recorded in this room before, and I was scared about, putting too many people in the room. But I think that, in retrospect, finding the balance. Like if you can afford not to overdub, don't do it, because that, yes, you think that you may save yourself some money by, like, if you only afford 4 players or 4-3, 4-3-3-3-1, 4-3-3-3-1, yeah, overdub, absolutely, right? Or if you only afford, 2-2-2, whatever, something really small, yeah, of course, overdub, right? But if you can afford, like the threshold of, say 6 players in your first violin desks versus 8, if you're able to afford those extra 2 players versus going back and overdubbing, you're going to save yourself a lot of time in post-production with editing, with you're going to save you a lot of like recording time and just general grief, like at any time overdubbing, it's just like, it's not fun. It's kind of a pain in the ass. So
so some people watching here making some comments saying good evening. And Darren, so you said about the budget. How would you budget? How would you, like, if some director comes to you to ask for a score, how would you budget your work?
Yeah, no. So I think the first thing that you need to do is you need to figure, well, you think of what you want, and then you pare down accordingly, right? And then you have to also think about how much money do you want to take home from this particular project, right? When I first started out, I was really bad about not taking home a lot of money, and now my wife screams at me for not taking a lot of money. So the first thing that I would do is you need to calculate how much music you're going to have, right? How much music you're going to record. A good rule of thumb is that you can generally do 5 minutes to an hour. What I'll say is this: that 5 minutes to an hour is fine if you do your homework, all the parts are well prepared, all your click tracks and all your MIDI tempo maps and all the Pro Tools files and all that stuff. Like if you have done your work and 5 minutes an hour should be easy, and you haven't written crazy hard music.
You record 5 minutes of music per hour.
Yeah, I think that's a good benchmark. I can do more than that. Like I've done as much as 7 or 8, but I think that you need to be careful. Don't get cocky. I've been burnt by being cocky, thinking, oh, I can do 10 minutes in an hour, and then I end up having to pay for overtime, right? So don't be cocky about that.
Yeah.
And then what I think you need to do, you need to figure out the instrumentation. What can you afford, right? And I often wait till when I'm on a project, I usually it drives my contractors nuts, right? But I wait till as late as I possibly can to lock down my instrumentation, because it's hard to know if you're can I really avoid using those trumpets? Do I really need that bass trombone? Can I get away with 4 horns? Can I get away with 3 horns, or can I get away with 4 horns, right? And the other thing, and not so much on that, is that I usually have a big ensemble and a small ensemble, right? So if I have strings generally stay constant, right? This is the size of the string, but can I get away with maybe for 2 of the sessions only with a couple of horns and a clarinet, and the rest of them, then I have 4 horns, 2 trombones, 2 trumpets, and winds, right? So if you're able to hold off till the very last minute contracting it, then do that, because then you have that flexibility. But what you also have to understand, though, is that for the contractors, it limits their ability to get the best players, right? If you're saying hey, can I tell you in 2 weeks? They're going, yeah, fuck, you can't do that, because you need it's a give and take, right? I know it drives my contractors nuts, but having the ability to be able to do that, and what I'll do that as I go along, I'll have a little spreadsheet that basically says this cue 2 minutes, XXX, who's playing, and it calculates, how many minutes do I need the the clarinet player? How many do I need the violin player, right? So then I determine what the lineups are going to be. So I'm not paying for the full orchestra for 3 whole sessions. I can break down the set, and then some of them, you may not need.
That's a great tip. That's a great tip, because if you hire the flute player to be there for 5 hours and you're recording just 20 bars.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And you also have to take into consideration a couple other things. So one of the things that I'm old school. I love recording everything at the same time. I love doing that in the same room. That's, it's maybe selfish of me because it's the most gratifying. Like, you get to wave your hand and then you hear this orchestra. You have your orchestra there. But when you go into it, you have to also take a look. Like sometimes, for one of these projects, it was like I only really need the horns and the strings for half of for 2 sessions, right? Or for 2 hours of a recording session, right? So instead of doing them, with the ensemble, I'll just bring them in at the end to do, or during lunch break or something like that, to do at time. So it's about thinking strategically, right? Sometimes you have to compromise on those things, but understanding where every instrument plays, when they do it, how long it is, how difficult the cues are, and how much time you're going to need for each cue helps you be able to let go of people early. And even if it's not a money thing, just musicians don't like sitting around. If you can if you can let them go early, they're happy, you're happy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and with your experience recording in Eastern Europe, where did you record and how was it?
So I record in Prague, and there are places that are cheaper in Prague that probably do just as good of a job. But what I alluded to again is the fact that it's trust, right? When I go there, I know the engineers, I know the studio techs, I know my contractor, I know a lot of the players, right? And I know that when I go in there, I know what I'm getting, right? So if it's $1,000 more than say going to Budapest or by going to Macedonia or something like that, I'm fine with that because that $1,000 means that I know that I'm going to go walk away with a good product. Right. So cheapest isn't necessarily the best, but I'm not saying that any of these other places aren't good places to record, but I have walked away from certain places where I haven't been happy because the engineer wasn't good or something like that. And once you're done that, it's like, well, what do you do, right? So so Prague is fantastic. Peter Pika, musa.cz. CZ. He's fantastic, and Peter's fantastic, and also the thing about Prague is that they very much understand film scoring. They understand how to play with a click track. They understand, they're studio musicians. They get it, right? So I've never walked away. I honestly don't know how many times I've recorded in Prague, but it's been a lot. But every time I've gone there, I've never walked away unhappy. So,
nice.
A lot of people will say, it wasn't a very good session or blah, 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 blah. They made me unhappy. I've never walked away unhappy, and I think that part of it goes back to what we were saying, is that you have to make sure, from a music preparation standpoint and from a session prep session, and we can talk about that a little later, your shit has to be together, right? You don't play around. If you don't want to waste time from that very beginning of the session, you're doing stuff with the orchestra, right? You're not dicking around. So
yeah. So how can you compare, if you would record those in LA with the same quality of musicians and the same quality of studio? How much would be more or less, and how much would be in Prague? Just so we have an comparison.
I think that if we were to do one session with say 35 players, I think that'll cost you anywhere from $5,000 to $6,000 US in Prague. Or that if you do that same session, I think that costs you $25,000. Basically, where you're saving the most money is on the players, right? So at a certain point, you're not going to go to Prague to record 5 players. It doesn't make sense, right? But once you hit a critical mass, right, to get the bigger orchestra, that actually makes sense then to go over there. And then, and everyone asks about the flight and everything like that. The flight and the hotel is such a small part of the budget. If you're spending, $10,000-$12,000 on an orchestra, you're a medium-sized orchestra for 2 sessions, what's $1,000? You know, what's
Mhm.
$1,000 on a flight and a couple $100 on some hotel? You go in, you go there, you have some fun in Europe, and you fly back. You know, it's a good time, right? So,
Mhm.
so the flight and that stuff, and quite frankly, a lot of the orchestras now too do source connect. Right, during COVID, during the pandemic, we did. I produced a couple of things, you know, for my studio, you know, with the orchestra in Prague, and I joked with my contractor. I said, you know, don't tell Gifty, my wife, don't tell Gifty that this worked so well, because she'll never let me come to Prague again, right?
I'll never travel again.
Yeah, exactly. She'll never let me go. But what's fantastic about it, and in some sense, it's almost than being in the booth. How we do the communication is that we do it by text, like text, not SMS, but like through Skype messaging, right? So that the producer in the booth has a computer, the conductor has a computer, you know, I obviously type in the computer,
Mhm.
and I'm just going as we go along, like measure 32, can we check the intonation of the violin, blah, blah, even as we're going through the take, so it's just silently going, but. And so right when the conductor stops, he sees my notes right there, as opposed to going, hey, Darren, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts about this, right? And if I need to go talk to them by voice, then I can, you know, it's easy to punch in and do that. But the fact that you're typing stuff in with, again, using Skype or whatever text messaging thing that you have, mean that you can do it while the orchestra is playing. You can write it down so you don't forget it, and it's instantaneous and it's great. So yeah, it works out really quite well. You don't have to fly there if you don't want to, but I highly recommend you do because it's fun.
But
So,
the contact is very important, right? It's
yeah.
very nice to talk to the musicians and engineer, and yeah. And in your experience, what caused the recording to stop? Like, let's say you're going for a recording, and then something comes up, and something happens, and the recording stops.
Yeah. Sometimes it's out of your control, right? Sometimes Pro Tools just flakes and go, you know. But the things I think that drive a recording session to stop is bad music preparation, right?
Mhm.
Like not having your score, like, you know, or there's some sort of mistake somewhere there, and then you're trying to figure out what's wrong with that mistake. And in that case, the best thing to do is to put that cue aside and to keep on going while you have your team in the background working to try to figure something out. Like never go into a recording session without other people, like a helper, an assistant, or something like that, because you need to focus at the task at hand. They can do things like, oh, we're missing viola 3M4. Okay, can you go print it out next cue 3M5? Let's go.
Right.
You know, and instead of waiting, okay, here's the part, you've now lost 5 minutes. That 5 minutes you can record in 2 takes on an easy cue, right? So, you know, it's things like that. That's what drive, you know, little confusion things. There's always going to be something that fucks up a recording session. You'll never have a perfect recording session. So it's not about trying to prepare for the perfect recording session. It's having the proper plan for when shit hits the fan, right? Like, you know, if you if you know that, like, you know, again, like you're missing a part, you have a printer in the studio and you have your assistant ready to print it, and all the stuff is on the hard drive, right, already good to go. If there's something wrong with the MIDI, if there's something wrong with the MIDI file, with the tempo map or the click tracks, you know, you're able to rebounce it up right there on the spot, or someone is back at the studio at home who's able to, you know, to fix it and redo that, right? You know, just making sure that you have those contingencies in place. The last thing you want to do is to have musicians sitting there doing nothing, right?
Right.
You know, one of the things that I learned when I was doing these recording sessions at 2 a.m. at McGill, you know, is that, like, you know, the minute people are sitting there and not doing anything, you lose the energy, you lose the momentum, you lose there's a psychology to it. And if they're just like, yeah, exactly, precisely, it's focus and determination. And if you lose that, it's very hard to get that back, and just like it feels like the session is dragging on and on and on. So even if Pro Tools is fucking up, okay, Great, fine. Let me know when you're up and going. Let's just rehearse. Let's just do this cue again. All right, let's go on to the next cue. Let's do it again. Even for the pure fact that it's not asking these musicians to just to not sit on their butt and do nothing, right? It's just to keep them busy, keep them occupied. Worst comes to worst, give them a break. Here, 10 minutes. Take 10 minutes.
Right.
We'll take a break. We're going to take our break now. Do something. Just don't have them sit there and do nothing, right? Because that's death. Right. That is pure death.
Right. So there. What about making a small orchestra sound in bigger orchestra?
Yeah.
Like, have any orchestration tips? To make it happen?
I think the biggest thing that I think with orchestration is that I've never worked. No, that's a lie. I mean, I've worked with 60-piece orchestras and I've worked with choir and all that stuff like that. You don't need 60, 100 players to sound big. Would I like to have a 60-piece string orchestra just in strings? Yeah, sure. Everyone would like that, but you don't have that. I think what it is from an orchestration standpoint is you need to make sure that your melody, your bass and your melody are covered, right? And then everything on the inside you can kind of fake, right? Because you don't hear that stuff as much, right? So if what you need, and you only have say you only have 7 or 8 violin players, right? In the section, right? What you can do is that you have a big sweeping string melody. Put all the put the violin 1, put the violin 2, put the viola, put them all on that melody, and then put other stuff supporting underneath. And that supporting stuff could be synth, it could be the horns, it could be other stuff, it could be piano, it could be whatever. But what you're going to hear is you're going to hear the big sweeping melody with strings, right? And that's what's going to be that's what's what people are going to hear, right? Same thing. Yeah, and same thing with soloists, right? Like if you can only afford like 1 or 2 players, right, then focus on the melody, or focus maybe on the bass as well too, right? Whenever I have to augment synth string, that's usually cello and violin, to play the upper 2 outline of it, so that you hear those things, and you let the middle just kind of be the samples, right? You can always for strings you can always overdub again, right? But what I would say is that just when you're calculating out your numbers, calculate it so that you know how many times, how many times you have to overdub it. You don't need to do anything like change microphones or to change seats or anything like that. That's a myth, right? People say that there's going to be phasing, but the phasing for something like that, it only really starts happening after the 4th or the 5th take. Every time that I brought that up with an engineer, like, nope, don't need to do it. It's a waste of time. So the whole phasing thing isn't really a big deal. I think that for winds, it's funny. I always hire, maximum 4 wind players, like flute, oboe, clarinet, bassoon. If I need to lose the bassoon, I lose the bassoon. If I need to lose the flute, I lose the flute. If I need to lose the oboe and clarinet, I find it very versatile. But I think that I use winds for color, like for the melodic color, not so much for vertical harmonic structure. And then for brass, I think horns make everything sound better. Horns act as a glue, with a really nice glue harmonically. If you don't have enough for the strings, add the horns in there in the middle, and that's going to glue everything together. I rarely, trumpet is such a loud instrument. I hardly use it, right? So that's one of the first things to go. So I think, in terms of tips for orchestration, and the other thing is that percussion, it's lovely to do it live, but honestly, the sample stuff sounds really great, and because that stuff is so loud, it almost needs to be done as an overdub. So if you're gonna have to overdub it, why not just use the samples, right? So that's something that's easy to get out.
Yeah, let's say you're putting all the strings to play the melody, like you said before. Use the samples to support the harmony, and then use all the strings to play the melody. Do you usually use them like in unison or octaves or both?
It depends, right? It depends on what the thing calls for. But obviously, both, unison and octave. It just depends on what it calls for. But there's something really nice about this big, thick string melody where they're all together at the same time, and you just, and then of course you can add samples to that on top of that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the key thing to remember, just orchestration wise, is that especially with small groups for strings, one player is a solo, three players is a section, and two together is just out of tune, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you never want to have two cello or two viola playing the same thing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you layer them on top of each other, it's fine, but you never want to have just two, because then the intonation becomes a real issue.
Right.
So.
I usually think a minimum of three, minimum of
Yeah.
three, to
Yeah.
start to sound like a group.
Yeah.
And we have a question here, Darren.
Yeah.
Let's see. Werner is a student of mine. So have you ever got surprised because the recording session took less time than what you expected, or just the opposite situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Both situations. I think, and I think it drives my assistants nuts, because that I get a little cocky because I work fast, right? And so I'm always trying to squish everything into we say, I've done 60 minutes of music in say 8 hours, which you should, 8 hours and 5 is 40 minutes, right?
That's a lot.
So
I remember we were, during the workshop, we were visiting some studio, and the composer said, I plan to write a minute of music a day. And,
wow.
Yeah.
That's not a lot at all.
16 minutes is a lot of music.
Yeah. Well, no. Sorry, not. So I'm talking about recording, right? So recording.
Oh, okay. Recording,
yeah.
not composing.
No. Recording.
Right.
So recording, I've done 2 4-hour sessions in a day, and I've done 60 minutes of music, right? So if you do the 5-minute rule, 20 minutes each session, that's 40 minutes. But I managed to do 60. One of the things that composing. My goal is 3 minutes a day, but sometimes it's horrible. I don't get anything done, and some days I get 10 minutes done, right?
Yeah.
I think that when you're composing, when you take a look at your where you are in the project, once you have your themes developed, you can move a lot faster, right? But at the beginning, it's always just trying to get that engine moving.
Yeah.
So
cool. And guys, if you want to ask any more questions, feel free to make comments or ask questions. Darren, you want to show something?
Sure. So I'll do two little things here. The first one, I apologize because there's some of my commentary on it, because this is for your consideration video for some Canadian awards. So this first one is from A Bee's Diary. So we didn't record this in Prague. We recorded this in Canada, but we recorded with a smaller ensemble. We had the budget, but we had to record it in Canada. So it's about 30 again. 30, and So let's just go
before you show, Darren, there's one more question here. Is it possible to make a soundtrack for an epic movie with a tight budget?
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, it's possible to do a soundtrack for an epic movie with no budget. You just won't record with an orchestra, right? I think what you have to do is that you have to take a look at the resources that you're given, and then see what you can realistically afford with it, right? If someone is giving you, and if you're starting out in your career, you only have $5,000 to do a feature film, right? You're not going to record with an orchestra because you have to keep some of that money for yourself. But it's about budgeting and understanding, how much each musician costs. A contractor will be able to help you out to figure out what you can afford with that and that. And then, sometimes maybe I'm going to have to do 2/3 of the film with samples only, and 1/3 of the film, all the really big cues, I can do with the orchestra, right? So it really depends. It really depends on everything. But you can do a big epic cue just in the box, completely in the box, right? So you don't need that orchestra. But I will say, the orchestra is nice.
Yeah, of course. And do you have an agent? Do you work with an agent too, or
Yeah. So
know your directors and?
my agent is Ari Wise at the Core Agency in Vancouver. So I just switched over. I was at Gorfin Schwartz before, but I switched over. And I think agents do a lot to help open doors and opportunities for you, but I think you still have to do the same amount of like pounding the pavement, networking, all that stuff like that to find gigs, right? Especially early on in your career. So
right. Let's go there to what you were going to show us.
Sure. So this is yeah. So this is B's diary. So this is this one here.
Rainy backdrop with timpani and heavy low synth notes and press.
Oh, should we start that from the top there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my commentary is there. Everyone will hear my commentary, and then we can talk about it afterwards. And what I can do is that I'll put the score up. I'll put the score up on my Dropbox, and people can. I'll put a link out there that people can look at the score as well too.
Have access to the score. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So everyone, if you'd like to have the score of the soundtrack, Darren is putting the link here so you can download the score.
This is a private chat link, so I don't know if this is available to work in there.
Just put it on comments because it's
comments. Oh, comments.
Private. Yeah, comments.
Got it.
Comments. Everyone has access.
Okay, I don't see how I put it under the comments here.
Do you want to select, copy and paste? I guess.
Yeah,
I'll do it.
You do it. Okay. Sure.
Just copy from private chat and here. I guess it's here.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So if you want to see the score, you can download it from there, from Darren's Dropbox. So let's see, Darren.
And just so you know, you'll hold on. Yeah. So this score here, I have to apologize. There's some corrections in red pen that I did for my assistant / orchestrator for there, but because I just couldn't find the actual final score somewhere in the Dropbox. But you'll get.
Who's the voiceover there?
That was me.
Oh yeah, I was recognizing the voice. I was like, yeah. I know this voice.
Yeah. No. And so what this was that we were doing a little small, we have no money campaign for the Canadian Screen Awards, and so we're just trying to generate content. So when we recorded, we had a bunch of the assistants and the interns go out there with iPhones and just do random 1, 2, 3 clap, sync it up, and then just have them filming random things and then we synced it all up. And a good friend, editor of mine and director, who I've scored way too many of his short films for free, I finally got to cash in the favor, and he put these together.
That's great. That's great.
So, yeah.
We have another question here. Do you still try lots of different kind of samples, or you already have the sounds you like the most and directly choose them when you need?
Sometimes I get tired of the samples in there, but for me, like, I've never been like a big I have to have like the most exciting sound of this or that. Like, oftentimes I buy a sample because I have a need for something. Like the sample doesn't work for one reason or not, right? Like, like sometimes it's just like, you know what, for one of the projects, the next project I'll show you, I bought Voxos, right, the Sinner Samples voice thing, because we recorded with a live soprano, but I had mocked it up with a boy soprano, and the director said, yeah, can we go back to boy soprano? And I said, well, I need to find a better boy soprano sample. So I ended up buying that, right? So there's often, when I buy samples, it's precipitated by a need for something, because I do most of the stuff I do orchestral, I have all the basics, I don't think you need, I think a lot of people hide behind the quality of their samples to make their orchestration sound good. And I think that you can use mediocre samples. Like obviously, it has to be at a certain level, but you can use mediocre samples if you know how to orchestrate, right?
Right.
You know, so if you know how to
Of
orchestrate,
course, if you don't know how to orchestrate, you can use the best samples. It's not going to sound good, right? If you don't know how to orchestrate. Have you used Vienna?
You know, I haven't. I use Vienna Ensemble Pro as sort of my thing. You know, as my.
I use the Appassionata strings. Do you know this? Appassionata from Vienna Symphonic Library. Oh, it sounds really nice.
You know, my thing for me, that it has to be easy, right? Like I don't want to spend a lot of time. I don't want to spend a lot of time fucking around with it and like, you know, adjusting things and all that stuff. You obviously have to do a lot of it, and that's sort of where my assistants come in also as well too. That they, you know, I'll get it to a certain point, and then they will go and they'll massage it. They'll spend more time on it, right? Because when you're working on big projects like that, like, you know, when you're working with like, you know, the 50-piece orchestra and the choir, you just don't have time to like focus on your mock-ups. Like, you know, for one of the bigger budget projects that we had, you know, we're doing 110 minutes in 7.5 weeks, right?
We have another question here from Junji. Rodrigo Junji is a student of mine. He's Japanese. Hi, Darren. What would be the key aspect of scoring a film that you think cannot be spared money?
Oh, geez, that's a good question. Okay, so what, Junji? I'll answer this question for me because that as a composer, like, you know, I can't mix to save my life. You know, like I honestly, I joke that I can't mix my way out of a box, right? Like, you know, it's like, oh, what does this knob do? What does that? Oh, what does that do? I'll spend 3 hours doing it. It sounds marginally better, and I've just wasted 3 hours, or they give it to someone else. So one of the things that I'll always spend money on is an engineer to mix. Yeah, to mix and master. Now, if you have those chops, then all the power to you, right? But that's something that I would do.
Which part do you have more fun doing, creating or conducting the orchestra during the recording session?
Good question. I mean, I see conducting as part of the creative process anyways, but I mean, conducting is fun. It's just, you know, what's sad about scoring is that when you're at a scoring session, you're so tired by the time you get there. Like I remember the last time I was in Prague doing some library tracks, I was so tired. I fell asleep standing up while I was conducting, right? Because I was pulling so much time. But you know, the conducting is like the reward, right? It's all rewarding, but like it's all fun. But like, you know, the cherry on top is being able to go and conduct that stuff. Whenever I'm done a recording session, I'll have so much adrenaline because it's just so much fun, right? But yeah, so yeah. I hope that answered your question, Jinji. I don't know if it did, but I hope that answers your question.
No, yeah, it was a good answer. I know each one would be like each composer would be like a different answer, but for you, it would be nice to spend some money on an engineering.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have something else here, Darren, to show. You want to show?
Yeah, sure. So this is a film that I did recently. Oh, just pause it for a second. Yeah. Do you want to share the score? I just put that in the chat, Douglas.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, there's a second.
Oh, the second score. Yeah,
we're
going to copy here and share with them.
So this is a project called Cinema Sleep.
So Juji is saying that it did answer his question.
Good, awesome, great. So this project called Cinema Sleep. It was done pre-pandemic, and then it didn't premiere until earlier this year, just because of all the pandemic. This is the opening, and so why don't we just watch it, and then I can tell you a couple of the interesting tricks that we did here.
Nice, Darren. Very nice.
Thank you.
I hear some influence there. Am I wrong? Some Bernard Herrmann influence?
Yeah, well, that was the temp, right? It was Bernard Herrmann, like, you know, some Psycho, some Bernard Herrmann, like that was the temp. It's supposed to be this, like, this hard-boiled detective sort of,
Oh, that was the reference. The temp track was.
Yeah.
Oh,
That was a lot of that. So it was, and so that was a small orchestra. So one of the interesting things, if people have the score up, one of the interesting things about this is that when we got to to measure 10, right now it's a staccato there, but it wasn't. It was going and it wasn't what I wanted, right? And then we tried. Okay, well, let's try doing it. Bowed, right? And it wasn't what I wanted. And so what we ended up doing is that we did. Well, first of all, remember what I said about putting as much as you can in the melody there with a small section. You see violin 1, violin 2, viola is all right there, right? It's all there. But what we did is that we said, okay, let's go divisi, half to staccato, half to staccato, half to slur, and that's what we got the texture that we wanted, right?
Oh, that's nice.
So having the ability to kind of, that's why I go there, right? To have the ability. I mean, yeah, you can do it from here, but to be able to make that change on the fly, only you can, you can do that. But then it's just there you're like, no, I want you to do this. No, that's not right. Blah 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 blah.
Let's try something else. Yeah. Because sometimes you put a sample there and it's written spiccato. But then when the musicians are playing, it doesn't sound spiccato, right? Yeah. So maybe you need to go there and say, oh, let's try something else. Yeah, exactly. Very nice. Exactly. Darren, I want to congratulate you for your job, for your amazing job. You're composing a lot, creating a lot. Very, very nice. I want to thank you for participating here in my live and talking to my audience. My audience is mainly like music students, some of my students from college, some friends of mine, so people in general.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they're very thankful to you too. And you want to say something else? We're about to finish.
No, send me a note, find me on Facebook, find me on Instagram, Twitter, whatever. Thank you for this. It's fun. It's fun to talk about this sort of stuff, like orchestration. It's really fun to be able to do it. So thank you, Douglas, for the forum.
Welcome, man. So guys, this is Darren's website. His company's name, Stinky Rice. What about this name, Darren?
You know what it was? I just didn't want DarrenFung.com. And so Stinky Rice was kind of fun, and yeah, I think it drives my mom nuts. She's like, I don't get it. I don't understand. It's funny.
Yeah, it's funny. You had already this name in 2004 when we met, right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, and it's I've had it. I've kept it. Yeah. So
that's cool, Darren. So I wish you all the best. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Soon. Indeed. Take care, Douglas. Cheers.
Take care.